so I dropped my bags, pulled back the covers and the sheets, and said, this is going to take some getting used to also, because the sheets were wet. We got daily, seemingly, heavy thunderstorms, and yeah, we have heavy thunderstorms here in McClure, but tropical downpours or something different. And the screening that kept out the bugs also allowed all that moisture to come in and get the sheets wet. No matter, I dived in bed and fell asleep almost instantly and slept until about 5 or so when I got awake and saw one of my hooch mates there changing clothes, and that's when I asked him about the refrigerator and the pineapple. I said, who does that belong to? He said, you. He said, and I said, well, how does it get there? He said, the hooch girl comes every day with fresh pineapple and loads the refrigerator. And I said, what else does she do? Well, she shines your shoes, she presses your clothes, she washes your clothes, makes your bed, cleans the floor, does everything that you would need to keep your area spotless. And I said, I'm going for that. Who pays for that? He said, you do. Because it's in your bill for the club every month. And I said, well, that's fair. I mean, I couldn't imagine somebody else doing all those neat things for me, especially polishing shoes, because I had so many years of polishing shoes that it was tiresome. Anyhow, about 5:36 I got up and went to the club where we took all our meals. Ed showed up, the guy who had esquired me around, and we went to the club. I was kind of a popular attraction for that evening because I was a new guy, and nobody likes anything more than a new guy who they can stick it to for the time until he's no longer the new guy. So as we finished our dinner, lots of people would come by and make catty remarks about the new guy, and wanted to know when I was going to be thrown into the meat grinder. And Ed says, tomorrow. He gets his orientation tomorrow, and it won't be too long. Anyhow, next morning I got up bright and early and had a leisurely shower and shave and walked over to the club for breakfast. And Ed met me at the door, and he said, now one thing you got to remember here, Paul, is when you go in this door, you better not be covered. Now all the military guys here know what being covered means. It means you're wearing your hat inside the door. Now if these guys over here, the honor guard, were to be like that and they weren't being the honor guard, or anybody back here in the crowd wearing a hat into the club at Barat, you got to open your wallet and buy for everyone. So there was a sign right in this door, inside the door, that says, he who enters covered here buys for all a round of cheer. I never had the privilege of performing that function because I was always very attentive to what I was doing when I went into the club. After breakfast, then we went to work, and I met the boss. He says, again, it was a major role. He said, get some sleep, you all rested up, you ready to go to work? And I said, oh yeah, boss, I'm ready to go to work. I have been told a lot by Ed about what the pace of work is here. It sounds very exciting, and I'm ready to contribute. I didn't tell him how scared I was about being in a combat wing and interacting with fighter pilots who just have the greatest egos in the world. I mean, I've never met people like them before or since. But they know that God made them first and made them best, and they would always be that. Anyhow, after I got my reassurances from the boss that I'd be able to handle that, he told Ed to take me around and show me some briefings and debriefings and to get me caught up on the rules of engagement, which basically were the rules of the war. what the pilots could do and what they couldn't do, where they could drop ordnance and where they couldn't, what they could drop on this target, what they had to drop on that target, so on and so forth. And it was a fairly thick set of rules that was so important that the pilots weren't even allowed to fly until they had passed the test indicating they had understood the rules of engagement and knew how to do their job. And as an intelligence officer, we had to do the same thing because we had two basic functions there in the wing. We had to brief them before their flights, tell them where their targets were, what the defenses were in the target area, when they were supposed to be on time on the target, called time on target or TOT, and also the various other aspects of what had happened in the last couple days to bring them up to speed so they would minimize their risk as they went out to bomb their targets. I followed either Ed Weiss, First Lieutenant Ed Weiss, or First Lieutenant Mark Wilcox for 2 days, sitting in on debriefings, sitting in on briefings, and I was impressed by the professionalism of all the intel officers, and I knew that I really had to work hard in order to maintain the standards that they had established. One of the other things I learned about during that period of time of orientation was that the fact that the F-105s were in Thailand and bombing North Vietnam was a secret. A secret to everybody except the newspapers, the Stars and Stripes, who published every day what the F-105s were doing in Thailand. And the only difference was that the King of Thailand and the government would not recognize the fact that Americans were carrying out bombing of North Vietnam from Thai bases. So it was a secret that everybody knew about, but we couldn't talk about. And the 105, as I said before, was the weapon of choice, and it was a very large airplane. You can't really get a feel for the size of it from this model, but it was larger than most all other fighters in Southeast Asia and Vietnam. The F-4 was pretty close, and the F-4 actually was able to carry more ordnance, but that was on paper. With the tactic of penetrating defenses at low altitude, 5,000 feet or below, the F-4 had to use afterburners in order to keep up with the 105. And they would fly just under the speed of sound at 575 or so knots or nautical miles per hour. And of course Jim Jones would know what a knot is because the Navy kind of invented that thing. But a nautical mile is 6,080 feet. Compared to what we know of miles as statute miles, 5,280 feet. So everything in flying is figured in terms of nautical miles per hour. One of the things that set the F-105 apart from the F-4 at that time was it had an internal gun. It had a Vulcan 6-barrel machine gun that, Gatling gun actually, that fired a 20-millimeter round. I'm going to pass this around, but this little case here has 2 dummy 20-millimeter rounds, along with the projectile that was in one of these 20 millimeters. And up here on the top was another thing that I got from Mr. Lau at the local surplus store called a flechette. These flechettes were included in bombs that were configured from cases that looked like 750-pound bombs. And these things would have either flechettes like this, similar to this, or they would have bomblets
that looked about like a little baseball, smaller than a little baseball. And if I could have somebody come up here and take this and pass it around. And this bomb, when it was dropped, just like another bomb, had a seam of primacord around the middle of the bomb, so that when it got to 5,000 or so feet above the ground level, this primacord would fire and separate the bombs, and all these little ships would rain down upon the enemy. We got a classified report into our intel shop as these things were coming online and going to be used against the enemy. And this report was classified secret, and it was sent from the company that made the bombs containing these flechettes. And they said that they had conducted tests of these things in an open field. Of course, nobody wanted to act as a tester, so they set up a test spot of 100 yards by 100 yards, and every yard in there, they put a 4-foot-high, 1-inch by 1-inch stake. And they figured that 4 feet was tall enough to reflect the average height of most Orientals. And the object was to see how many of those sticks, and how many, somebody here can do math real quick and tell me how many sticks were in that 100 by 100 yards? 100 by 100, I think it's 10,000. Anyhow, all these sticks were erected, and they flew a mission against them and dropped this CBU bomb, and there was not one stick standing uncut or unbroken or smashed by that CBU. So they were absolutely devastating. And they were used by a mission called Wild Weasels, and that was a code name for the SAM, or surface-to-air missile, hunter-killer folks who flew with the strike forces, and their only purpose in life was to go in like a weasel did. Weasel went into a hole to get out. Dachshunds went into a hole to get out the weasels, and this airplane did the same sort of thing. Early in the war, they were F-100s, which were supersonic aircraft, but they didn't have nearly the capability of the 105. And about 3 months after I was assigned there, they switched over to F-105. They finally came on board. And the interesting thing about the debriefing of these guys was that since they had no specific target assigned, they were all over the sky. It was extremely difficult to get them to tell their story and know exactly where they were and get it down on paper. But that was a challenge that we really liked. I was assigned to the Wild Weasels on paper, but all of we intelligence officers were assigned to the wing headquarters, and that's where all of our work was done. My two friends, Ed Wiest and Mark Wilcox, were assigned to the 421st and the 469th Tactical Fighter Squadron, and as I said, I was assigned to the Wild Weasels. Our daily work was 10 to 12 hours a day. We arrive about 10:30 or 7:30 in the morning and work until 5:30 or 7:30, depending upon when all the missions had returned and the debriefings completed and the reports were written. We had 6 days of work and 1 day off a week, and on days off we would always sleep in because we always had to get up early on other days, and so I don't think there was a day I had off that I didn't sleep in. And we'd, after getting some breakfast or lunch at the club, we'd go downtown to shop in the shops for
stuff like Thai silk, wood carvings, jewelry, bronzeware, or other things made in Thailand that would make nice mementos to either send home or take home. It was on one of these trips downtown that I got exposed to some real Thai culture. And that was when I got onto the bus, I noticed, well, the bus was full mostly of Thai people. And I saw one empty seat about a little over halfway back on the left side. So I went back and my buddy, we sat in that seat. And I noticed as I sat down, there was a young Thai woman in the seat behind us, and she had on her lap a box approximately 12, 14 inches square and about 8 inches high. And I had no idea what it was, and I wasn't worried about it, but we hadn't gone very far until I heard what appeared to be scratching on this box. And the guy across the aisle from us was a GI, and he said, "You know what that girl has?" And I shook my head, no. And he said, "She's got a box of rice bugs." I said, "What are rice bugs?" He said, "Well, you've probably seen them out there on the flight line around the big lights every night, because they have these long poles with nets on them, catching them like butterflies." And I said, "Yeah, I saw them doing that, but I didn't know what in the world they were doing." He said, "Yeah, well, rice bugs are considered to be a delicacy in Thailand. And they eat them one of three ways. They either eat them raw and crunch them as a snack, or they eat them in soups or in stir fry. And these bugs were about 2.5 to 3 inches long and about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in width. And they looked to me like giant cockroaches because they were exactly the same color. And about that time, this woman, as I was turning around, she opened the box, and sure enough, the box was filled with rice bugs. Well, needless to say, I never tried any of the rice bugs while I was in Thailand.